we are going to speak about two rules, two principles in the Torah. The first principle is from the book called Sefer Yetzirah, the book of formation. It's the oldest book in Kabbalah. It's attributed to the wisdom of Abraham, Avraham Avinu. It was redacted by Rabbi Akiva, the teacher of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, the Rashbi. As you know, Rabbi Akiva did not begin to learn the Aleph Beis until he was 40 years old, and then he became one of the greatest teachers of Israel. In the book Sefer Yetzirah, it says like this: the beginning is wedged in the end, and the end is wedged in the beginning. In other words, Torah is not linear. Rather, Torah is cyclical. It doesn't go this way, it goes this way, or this way. It never ends, but rather, it once again returns. That's the first rule. The second rule is Hakoel Holech Achar Hachitum. Everything follows the end, the conclusion. You could be a small person, a slow runner, but you may finish the race first because you're consistent. It doesn't matter where you started, it matters where you ended. So we follow the end. Hakoel Holech Achar Hachitum. It's about how you get to the finish line, making sure you make the finish line, and how you finish your life, how you finish your day, and how you finish what you started. It's all about the finish. Based on these two rules, we're going to look into the parsha of Bechukotai, which is the final parsha in the third book of the Torah, the book of Leviticus. The Torah here ends with two mitzvos, two korbanos, two sacrifices. One is called the Bechor, the firstborn sacrifice, and the second one is called Meiser, the Meiser sacrifice. What does that mean? If a person has a cow, or a person has a sheep, and that cow or sheep gives birth to a child, to a lamb, to a calf, that first child of the animal needs to be dedicated to God, is brought on the altar. That's called Bechor. In humans, we don't put humans for sacrifices. That's not our religion. But similarly, when you have a firstborn son, that son belongs to God, and therefore you have to redeem that child. Similarly, if you have a non-kosher animal, like a donkey, and it gives birth to a firstborn child, you don't put that small donkey onto the altar because it's not kosher. Here too, you redeem it, and you give the Kohen a sheep instead. But the idea of Bechor, the firstborn, is something universal throughout the whole Torah. On one level, it means that the first and the best we need to dedicate to God. On a very practical level, you get up in the morning, the first thing you say is not good morning, dear, but rather thank you, Hashem, moidani lefanecha, for giving me back my soul. You don't go right away to work, but you first daven. You pray, you study some Torah, then you have breakfast, then you go work. So the idea is Bechor, the first and the best, is dedicated to God. But this is automatic. What does automatic mean? You don't have to now take the animal and make a special blessing and then sanctify it and choose it to be brought for a sacrifice before God. Automatically, it is sanctified. This is sanctified from God, from above. The firstborn animal, this belongs to God. You don't have to do anything. It happens by itself. Then you have the second sacrifice, the sacrifice of Meiser, which is the tithe. What is a tithe? A tithe is that you have 10 sheep that were born to you this year. So you put them into a barn, you open up the door, you start to count as they walk out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. When it comes to the 10th, you take red paint and you put it on the 10th and you say, this is the 10th. This is Meiser. And this is also dedicated to God. This, however, is done by the human. It's done by mankind. Humankind, a man or a woman. We are the ones that dedicate and sanctify the 10th to God. It's not automatic. We have to put it into the barn. We got to count it. There's a process. And then we take action to cause it to become sanctified for God. In other words, there are two levels of holiness. There's a holiness that comes from above, which is the firstborn. That's from above to below. And there's a holiness that we, as humans, have the ability to create and to develop by the fact that we make it holy, we sanctify it. Now, these two ideas, which are found at the end of the Parsha of Bechukotai, the end of the book of Leviticus, we now bring it back to the beginning because the end is wedged in the beginning, as it says in Sefer Yetzirah. So we go back to the beginning. Number one, we go back to the beginning of the Torah, but we can also go back to the beginning of the Parsha. So each Parsha is cyclical. Each book is cyclical. Everything in the Torah is cyclical. So how do we connect this to the beginning of the book of Vayikra, to make the book whole? We read a few moments ago, the Torah starts with the words, Adam ki yakriv mikem korban Hashem. A person who wants to get close to God should bring a sacrifice min habehema from the animal. These two ideas, number one, getting close to God. Number two, and that is to bring an animal. These two levels represent the Bechor, the firstborn, and the Meiser, the tithe. In other words, the first aspect of the verse is from above to below, and the second aspect is from below to above. What does that mean? Adam ki yakriv mikem means Adam, we are alluding here to supernal man, primordial man. Primordial man, Adam ki yakriv mikem. In other words, God Almighty inspires us and wants us to get closer to Him. So this is from above to below. Many times in life, at certain occasions, we get inspired. You say, you know what, I want to get closer to God. It could be on Yom Kippur, it could be at the Pesach Seder, it could be at a wedding, it could be at a bris. But there are times in our life that there's an inspiration. This is Adam ki yakriv mikem. And that is Adam, the supernal man, primordial man, above, decides to bring us closer to Him. So now we are inspired. The verse continues, min habehema, but it has to be brought from the animal. In other words, we now need to dedicate our animal soul to God. We can't just say, well, I'm inspired, great, and then you leave, and I'm no longer inspired, you forget about it. To keep that inspiration in your daily life, you need to contribute, you need to participate, you need to do something. What do? We bring our animal soul closer to God. And that is by praying, and that is by making a blessing before we eat, and that is by performing the mitzvahs. By doing these things, we are able to elevate now our animal soul to God, and therefore feel that sense of inspiration throughout the entire day, not only once or twice a year. This same idea also applies to the beginning of Bechukotai. Again, we have the inspiration from above, and then the participation from below. So the Torah says, in the beginning of Bechukotai, in the beginning of the final portion of the Torah, Im bechukotai telechu. If you will go in my ways. That's a simple interpretation. According to Chassidus, the word bechukotai means from the word chakika, to engrave. And that is the soul of every Jew, the soul of every person is engraved in the supernal worlds. In other words, in essence, we are one with God. And because of the fact that the source of our soul is engraved within Almighty God, therefore, telechu, this automatically causes us to move, to be a trailblazer, to constantly have a desire and inspiration, never to be satisfied, but rather to go higher and higher. But that desire to always go higher and higher is really a blessing and a gift from God. We didn't do anything. We're born that way, with a soul that has that connection with God that's infinite, and therefore the soul has an infinite desire and passion to grow. But that's not enough to have that desire. You have to do something with it. And therefore the pasuk continues, Ves mitzvosai tishmoidu, and therefore you shall heed my mitzvahs. You have to do physical, practical mitzvahs. So it's good to be in a state of inspiration. It's good to be excited. And there are many people that like to make goals and things they're planning and doing and dream about the future. That's wonderful. But that is a gift from above. What we need to do is action. V'es mitzvosai tishmoidu, to bring it into action. And that is really the conclusion of the Torah, the two mitzvahs that we speak about in the conclusion of the Parsha of Bechukotai, the end of the third book. On one hand, we have the mitzvah of Bechor, the firstborn. On the other hand, we have the mitzvah of Meiser, the tithe. The Bechor, firstborn, according to Kabbalah, means the first of our attributes. The first of our attributes is the concept of self-sacrifice, mesiras nefesh, a desire to connect with God. And that desire of mesiras nefesh, to connect with God, is so powerful that we see throughout history Jews that perhaps were not that knowledgeable or that observant when it came to life and death. Are you going to bow down to the idol? Or are you going to give up your life? Many Jews said, look, I'm not going to convert out of my religion. I'm not going to bow down to an idol. Do what you want, but I am a Jew. That connection is a gift from God. That is something which God gave us. That is the DNA, how He hardwired our soul. That is the Bechor, that is the firstborn in us. But then we have Meiser. Meiser means the tithe, but also means 10. It alludes to the 10 attributes, the Eser, Koches, and Nefesh, starting from intellect, understanding, knowledge, going into Chesed, Gevura, Tveres, kindness, severity, mercy, etc., etc. The final one, the 10th one, is called kingship. Kingship is action. That's what a kingship is. A king is all about making sure that we win the war. It's about the action. And therefore, the 10th, or the tithe, alludes to machshava, dibur, maisa, thought, speech, and action, which are the three garments of the soul, which are about taking the potential and bringing that into reality. So this is the beginning and the end of the book of Leviticus. On one hand, it starts with inspiration, but yet we need to take that inspiration and bring it into action. Now, we said earlier that there are two principles. One is the beginning is wedged in the end, and number two is everything follows the conclusion. So sometimes when you're a student, you start off in first grade, second grade, you're not doing so well, but once you wake up and you're in college, now you become the greatest student and you get the best job because you woke up, you decided, I want to start learning, I want to get serious. The same as with life. Sometimes you're younger, You don't care about the world. You don't care about making a difference. But as you get older, more mature, you say, you know what? I want to make a difference in this world. So it's about the end. It's about how you end off your life, how you conclude, how you finish the race. And therefore, this also explains the fact that these two sacrifices, the sacrifice of Bechor, which is the firstborn, and then the second one is Meiser, which is the tithe, is in that order. First the firstborn, then the tithe. So you can argue and say the reason the firstborn is first, this represents God's inspiration from above to below. The second one is the fact that we are now doing our own thing. We are participating. That comes second. But it's not only by default. The fact that the final sacrifice is the Meiser, which is the fact that we give a tithe to God, this implies that, as we find in other places, Meiser hua ikar. The most important thing is the action. And this is synonymous with everything follows the end. And that is why this is the final mitzvah in the book of Bechukotai, which is the korban, the sacrifice of Meiser, of giving that tithe, making that holy, sanctifying it unto God. Because really, that is the general mission of each one of us here in this world, and that is to sanctify this world and make this world a holy place unto God. And we have that power, we are given that potential, and therefore we need to act upon that, and that is the way we fulfill our purpose on this world. Using this concept, I would like to apply it also to the Sfirat Omer. As you know, we count each day for 49 days from Passover to Shavuos. Each day we count another day, anticipating the revelation of God in Sinai, the excitement of Shavuot. And each year, once again, God gives us the Torah in Sinai. It's not something which happened over 3,300 years ago, and now we're simply celebrating it as an anniversary. But in reality, each year at Shavuot, God comes down to the mountain and once again hands each and every one of us the Torah. As it says in the Ten Commandments, Anochi Hashem Lekecha, I am God your Lord, in the singular. God is talking to each one of us. God is calling each one of us. So each day we make a bracha, we make a blessing, and we count the Omer. As we spoke in the past numerous times, that when you make the blessing on the Omer, you need to have a kavanah, you need to meditate upon numerous things. One of these things that you meditate upon is the letter of the day. Each day has a different letter. Now the first day of the Omer, the letter is the letter Yud. And the final day, the 49th night of the Omer, is the letter Hey. So again, to apply these two concepts, and that is the beginning is wedged in the end, and the end is wedged in the beginning, number one. And number two, everything follows the end. So what's the connection between the Yud at the beginning and the Hey at the end? Well, we all know that God's name, the tetragrammaton, starts with Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. If that is the case, the first letter Yud alludes to the letter Yud of God's name, which is the first of the tetragrammaton, and the letter Hey at the end alludes to the second Hey in God's holy name. Now, each one of these four letters represent a different concept. The letter Yud of God's name represents the concept of Chachma. Chachma, intellect. Chachma is koyach ma, the power of what? It's really about self-sacrifice, as we spoke earlier. This is a gift from God. This is God inspiring us. That's the letter Yud. That's the soul that we all have. Im Bechukotai telechu, to be engraved in God's mind. This is a gift from Hashem. This is above to below. That's the letter Yud. The soul of a humankind is like a flame, like the letter Yud, constantly soaring to go higher and higher and to connect with its maker. That's not us. That's Him. That is the gift that we have. That's the beginning of the Omer. That's the inspiration to give us the power to count the 49 days. But then we get to the final Hey. The final Hey at the end of the Omer is the final Hey in the name of God. And that Hey represents action. Because you have the Yud is Chachma, the concept, intellect. The Hey, Bina, understanding. The Vav represents Torah, and the Hey represents mitzvos. Or the Vav represents emotions, and the Hey represents action. So, in other words, on one hand, the Yud and the Hey are connected. It spells out the name of God. It's one thing. It's cyclical. On the other hand, the most important thing is the deed. We follow the end, and that is the final Hey, and that is our participation. Showing up, getting involved, doing the mitzvahs with your thought, with your speech, with your action, to make it into a reality. And then it goes back to the beginning again. Because after you do an action, after you do a mitzvah, God once again inspires you and gifts you the desire to go to another mitzvah. And it says mitzvah, goyredes mitzvah. One mitzvah leads to another mitzvah. That is a reward. So we go back to the letter Yud, we start all over again, because we now receive a higher inspiration to do even more. So this is the conclusion of the book of Bechukotai. And we end off by saying chazak, chazak, v'nischazek, to be strengthened, and to be strengthened, and to be strengthened. To be strong, and be strengthened again, which is, now that I finished, now that I did the action, there's a reward that comes from God. Another inspiration that we should continue to the next book. Another inspiration to do another mitzvah. Another inspiration to make a dwelling place for God down here in this world. We're getting closer to Shavuos. The holiday of Shavuos marks the passing of King David HaMelech, and it also marks the passing of the Baal Shem Tov, who also passed away on the holiday of Shavuos. And therefore I'd like to tell a story that has both King David and the Baal Shem Tov in one story. And the story goes like this. In the town where the Baal Shem Tov was born, in the town of Okop, there was a Jew by the name of Rabbi Yoel, and he was very wealthy. And this Rabbi Yoel decided he wanted to write a Sefer Torah. It's a mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah or dedicate a Sefer Torah. If you can't write it on your own, you hire a sofer to do this. And so Yoel wanted to fulfill the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah. What did he do? He commissioned a shochet, a slaughterer, to slaughter a few sheep, and he gave the meat away to the poor as a gift. They took the hide of the sheep, they made klaf, parmit from this, and he hired the top sofer to write a beautiful scroll in his honor. And when the scroll was finished, he planned a big party, like you're supposed to do. It's like a wedding. And you have a kafis, like Simchas Torah. At the same time, he prepared a pilpul, a big, deep Torah insight in Talmud, halacha, to share at the celebration of the Sefer Torah, to show off his genius and his knowledge in Torah law. And as he's preparing, of course, he invites all the rabbis of the community, the top people, government, etc., etc. There was a man in the town by the name of Betel, the water carrier. He was not a great Torah scholar. He was a simple Jew. He used to go every day to the Chevra Tehillim synagogue. That was the Chevra, the guys who recite Tehillim. Every morning they would recite the entire Tehillim, the entire book of Psalms, before the Shacharis prayer. All 150 Psalms in the book of Tehillim. And he said, wow, this is a big mitzvah, a new Sefer Torah. I want to participate. So he puts on his rags, his Shabbos rags. He was a very poor man. And he shows up to the Siyum Sefer Torah, the conclusion of the Sefer Torah. Just like we concluded the third book, now they concluded all 5 books. And he shows up. And he sits down at the table. Rabbi Yoel walks over and sees Beryl and says, look, Beryl, you may recite a lot of Tehillim every day, but you're not a Torah scholar. I only invited the Torah scholars here. Beryl got the hint very quickly. He got up and he left the table. Well, the festivities began. They concluded the Torah. They danced. Rabbi Yoel gave over his beautiful, intellectual, deep pilpul on the Talmud, and everybody was happy. And he was smiling from ear to ear. And after the day was over, he said the Shema and went to bed, and he was so excited. He was on a high. He closed his eyes, and he was ready to dream. And he did dream. He sees his soul soaring with a big wind into the middle of the desert. And in the middle of the desert, there's a hut. And all of a sudden, his soul comes into the hut. And there he sees 3 judges. And they are calling him to a din Torah. They are calling him to court. What happened? Who is the plaintiff? King David. King David is calling Yoel to court. What happened? King David, who's the author of the book of Tehillim and the editor of the book of Tehillim, was very upset how Yoel made away with the whole book of Tehillim like it's nothing. And furthermore, he embarrassed Beryl, who recites the book of Tehillim every single day. The judges convened, they spoke, and they concluded, yes, Yoel has committed a terrible crime. He deserves to die because of the fact that he undermined the importance of Tehillim and he embarrassed Beryl. Yoel is now trembling. Oh my goodness, such a terrible sin he committed. What should he do? Luckily, the Baal Shem Tov arrives at the scene. The Baal Shem Tov is now coming to defend Yoel. And Baal Shem Tov says, look, if Yoel is going to die, nobody will know the greatness of the book of Tehillim. Nobody will know what he did wrong. Let him go back down to earth. Let him tell the story. Let him enhance the book of Tehillim. And that will be his punishment. And that will be his tshuva, his repentance. The judges spoke between each other. And they concluded, okay, Baal Shem Tov. If that's what you want, that is what we will do. And that was the end of the dream. Yoel wakes up in a cold sweat. He realizes it wasn't a dream, it was real. He was standing before the court, and his life was in their hands. The next morning, he got up early. He came to the shul, Chevet Tehillim, and he told the whole story before all the congregants of the synagogue. He apologized to Beryl for embarrassing him, and each day he was found in the Chevet Tehillim synagogue reciting the entire Tehillim. So my dear friends, as we conclude the 3rd book of the Torah, we are reminded that on the holiday of Shavuos, we should also conclude the book of Tehillim. And we know that Chabad Chassidim have a custom every Shabbos Mevorchim, the Shabbos before the new month, to recite the entire book of Tehillim. And similarly, every day, to recite a piece of Tehillim divided up into 30 days. So therefore, every single month, we then finish the book of Psalms, the book of Tehillim. This, no doubt, brings tremendous blessing, tremendous bracha, and hatzlacha, and success to those who recite it. It brings tremendous, tremendous power and protection to our brothers and sisters in Israel. And we hope and pray very, very soon to see this holiday of Shavuos, once again, when we receive the Torah from God, together we shall be with King David and the Baal Shem Tov and all the great teachers and the great luminaries of Israel, with the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days.